The driveway was 3 miles long and full of dust. Nora Chen had driven 18 hours from Brooklyn, her sedan packed with suitcases and a laptop bag and a box of advance copies she'd never read, and now she was bouncing down a rutted dirt road in western Colorado, watching the mountains get bigger and the cell signal get smaller. She was 32 years old, a ghostwriter for people whose names sold books but whose sentences didn't. And she'd just been dumped by her fiancé of 5 years because, in his words, "You can write anyone's inner life except your own." He wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. The ranch appeared over a rise like a sentence she hadn't expected. A low, sprawling house with a metal roof, a barn listing to one side, and a corral full of horses that looked up as she passed. A man was leaning against the porch railing, watching her approach. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded baseball cap and a work shirt with the sleeves cut off. His arms were tanned and scarred, and when she got out of the car, he didn't move to help. "You the writer?" he said. "Nora Chen. Your publisher sent me. We spoke on the phone. I remember." He pushed off the railing and came down the steps. He was bigger up close, the kind of big that used to belong on a pitcher's mound. Cole Bennett, 41 wins, 1 all-star appearance, 1 very public shoulder injury, and a retirement so abrupt it had spawned 3 conspiracy theories and a documentary nobody watched. "Vivian said you were persistent. I prefer professional." "Professional?" He said it like it was a disease. "Look, I told Vivian I don't want to do this book. She told me the contract says I have to. So here's how this works. You stay 6 weeks. You write whatever you want. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. But I'm not talking to you. Not about baseball. Not about the shoulder. Not about anything." "Got it?" Nora looked at him. She'd dealt with difficult subjects before. A reality star who cried during every interview. A CEO who'd tried to pay her to leave out the fraud. A former child actor who could only communicate in movie quotes. But Cole Bennett was different. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to be difficult. He was just closed, the way a door is closed when nobody's home. "Got it," she said. "Where's my room?" He grunted and led her inside. The house was clean but spare. Leather furniture, a fireplace, bookshelves with exactly 4 books on them, all about baseball. The kitchen had a coffee maker and nothing else. The guest room was down the hall, made up with clean sheets and a lamp that didn't work. Bathrooms across the hall. "Breakfast is on your own. I eat at 7. Don't come into my study. Don't go in the barn without asking. And for God's sake, don't call me Cole Bennett like you're reading a box score." He left. Nora stood in the guest room and listened to his boots cross the hardwood floor, a door close, the house go quiet. She unpacked. She set up her laptop on the desk by the window. She made a list of interview questions in a notebook, then crossed them all out because she already knew he wouldn't answer any of them. Then, because she was a ghostwriter, and ghostwriters don't wait for permission, she went exploring. The house was small. Living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms. A study at the end of the hall with the door closed. She didn't open it. She went outside instead, walked toward the barn, and stopped when she saw him. Cole was in the corral, leaning against the fence, watching a horse roll in the dirt. He had a beer in one hand and he was talking to it. The horse, not the beer. Low and steady. Words she couldn't make out. The horse got up, shook itself, and ambled over to nudge his shoulder. Cole scratched its forehead, and for a second his face did something she hadn't seen on the porch. It softened. Nora turned and went back inside. She found the laundry room, the pantry, the half-bath, and then, because the study door was slightly ajar and she was, by profession, a person who looked for stories in the cracks, she glanced inside. There was a desk, a laptop, and on the desk, a stack of handwritten pages, 20, maybe 30 of them, covered in Cole's messy, slanted handwriting. The top page had a title underlined twice, The Last Inning. Nora didn't go in. She didn't touch anything. But she stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at those pages and thought, he's already writing it. He just doesn't want anyone to know. That night, she lay in the guest room bed and listened to the ranch breathe, the wind in the pines, the distant whinny of a horse, the creak of the house settling. She thought about Jake, her ex-fiancé, and the way he'd said she couldn't write her own life. She thought about Cole Bennett, retired pitcher, difficult subject, secret writer. She opened her laptop, started a new document, typed a title, subject, Cole Bennett. Day 1. He says he won't talk. I think he's already talking. I just have to find where he put the words. She saved it, closed the laptop, and somewhere down the hall, she heard a door open and close, and the soft sound of a man writing in the dark. A week in, and Cole Bennett had said exactly 47 words to her. Nora was counting. It was a habit. She counted things when she was nervous, words and steps and breaths. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mouth shut. 47 words in 7 days. Most of them were directives. Coffee's on the counter. Don't leave the gate open. The shower runs hot for 10 minutes. None of them were about him. None of them answered a single question on her list, but she was writing anyway. She wrote about the way he moved. Slow, deliberate, like every step cost him something. She wrote about his left shoulder, which he favored, holding it close to his body when he thought no one was looking. She wrote about the horses and how he talked to them, and how the horses listened. She wrote about Mabel, the 70-year-old neighbor who showed up every other morning with pie and stories about Cole when he was a kid, and who said, "He's not difficult, honey. He's scared. Scared dogs bite too." On the 8th day, the fence broke. Nora heard it from the kitchen, a sound like metal tearing, then a horse's whinny, then Cole's voice, sharp and urgent. She ran outside. One of the horses, a big chestnut mare named Daisy, had gotten a leg caught in the wire and was panicking, pulling harder, the wire cutting into her skin. Cole was there, his shirt off, his hands steady, talking to the horse in that low voice she'd heard through the corral fence. "Hold her," he said to Nora, not looking up. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the mare's halter, held on, talked to her the way she'd seen Cole do. Low, calm, meaningless words that meant, "I'm here, you're safe, it's almost over." Cole freed the leg in under a minute, the wire clipping clean with a pair of pliers, and then he was wrapping it in gauze, his hands gentle despite their size. Daisy calmed. Cole stood up, breathing hard, sweat on his forehead, and looked at Nora. "You're good with her. I grew up with a dog. Same principle." He almost smiled. Almost. "Come on, I need a beer." They sat on the back porch, the sun going down behind the mountains, and Cole opened 2 beers. He handed one to Nora without asking if she wanted one. She took it. "That shoulder," she said, because the moment felt fragile and she didn't want to waste it. "What happened?" He drank. Stared at the mountains. Game 5 of the playoffs. 9th inning, bases loaded. I threw a slider and felt something pop, like a rubber band snapping inside my arm. Knew it was over before I hit the ground. He paused. "Doctor said I could rehab. Maybe pitch again." I tried, for a year. Couldn't get past 85 miles an hour. Used to throw 98. 85 might as well have been 50. I retired rather than be mediocre. Nora thought about the manuscript in his study. The last inning. That must have been hard. It wasn't hard. It was empty. He looked at her, and his eyes were tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. You spend your whole life being one thing, and then one day you're not. You don't know what's left. She knew that feeling. She'd spent 5 years being Jake's fiancé, and then one morning she wasn't, and she'd stood in their empty apartment and thought, what's left? "I got dumped," she said. It came out before she could stop it. 2 months ago. 5 years. He said I could write anyone's story but my own. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's an idiot." It was such a simple thing, so plainly said, that Nora almost laughed. Instead, she took a drink of beer and watched the last light leave the mountains. They sat like that until the stars came out. Not talking, not needing to, the porch creaking under them, the horses quiet in the corral, the mountains dark and solid and permanent. At some point, Cole got up and built a fire in the pit by the porch, and they moved closer to it, and the firelight made his face look younger, softer, less like the retired baseball player on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and more like a man who'd been alone too long. "Why won't you talk about it?" Nora said, nodding at the house, at the study. The book. You're writing it anyway. I saw the pages. The last inning. Cole's jaw tightened. You went in my study. The door was open. I didn't touch anything, but you're writing it, Cole. You're writing the real one. So why hire me to write the fake one? He stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. Because the real one's not for anyone. It's for me. The fake one, he stopped. The fake one pays the mortgage. Nora thought about that. About the difference between the story you tell the world and the story you tell yourself. About the manuscript she'd been meaning to write for 3 years. The one about her mother. The one she'd never shown anyone. About how some stories are too true to share. I won't use it, she said. Your pages. I won't read them, won't quote them, won't even mention them. That's your story. I'll write the one you signed up for. The baseball one. The safe one. Cole looked at her. Really looked. Like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the writer from New York. Not the ghostwriter Vivian had sent. But a woman sitting in his firelight with beer on her breath and honesty in her voice. Okay, he said. Okay. They didn't say anything else for a long time. The fire burned down. The stars got brighter, and when Nora finally stood up to go inside, her legs stiff from sitting, Cole stood too. And for a second, they were close. Closer than they'd ever been. The fire between them gone. The night air cold on her skin. He reached up and brushed something from her hair. Ash. Maybe, or a leaf, and his fingers grazed her ear, and she felt it all the way down to her toes. Good night. Nora, he said, his voice low. Good night. Cole, she went inside. She didn't turn on the light. She stood in the dark guest room and touched her ear where his fingers had been, and thought, 47 words. And now this. She opened her laptop. Started a new note, typed, Day 8. He talked. About the shoulder. About the emptiness. He called my ex an idiot. He touched my hair. I think I'm in trouble. She saved it. Closed the laptop. And somewhere outside, the fire crackled on. And a man who didn't talk sat in the dark and watched the house where the woman who wrote everything was sleeping. By week 3, the ranch had become a kind of language they shared. Nora knew which coffee mug was his, chipped on the handle, never washed with soap. She knew he ate breakfast standing up, reading the sports page, and that he talked to the horses by name while he fed them. She knew his left shoulder ached when the barometric pressure dropped, and that he rubbed it without thinking, the way some people twist rings. And she knew, because she'd spent 3 weeks watching him, listening to him, writing him down, that Cole Bennett was nothing like the man in the press clippings. He wasn't angry. He was lonely. They'd taken to eating dinner together on the back porch, watching the sunset behind the San Juans. He'd cook. Steak. Potatoes, something on the grill. And she'd bring wine. And they'd talk. Not about baseball, not about the book, but about everything else. Movies, books. The way the sky looked different at 9,000 feet. Once he'd asked her about her mother, and she'd told him about the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 3 jobs, who'd died 2 years ago and left Nora with a box of letters she'd never been able to read. He'd listened. He hadn't fixed it. He'd just listened. It was a Tuesday night when it happened. They were on the porch, the wine gone, the fire low, and Cole was telling her about the first time he'd ever thrown a no-hitter, Little League, 12 years old, his dad in the stands, the only time his dad had ever come to a game. His voice got quiet at the end, and Nora reached over and covered his hand with hers. He turned his hand over and laced their fingers together. And then he was leaning in, and she was leaning in, and his mouth was on hers, slow and careful, like he was asking permission with every second of it. And she was kissing him back, her hand in his hair, the fire crackling between them forgotten. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of kiss that happened in movies. It was quiet and warm and a little shaky, and when he pulled back, his forehead was resting against hers, and they were both breathing like they'd been holding their breath for years. Tell me to stop. He said, don't stop, she said. He didn't. The knock on the door at 7. The next morning was so loud it made the coffee slosh in Nora's mug. She opened it. Jake was standing there, in a button-down shirt and chinos, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked like he'd grabbed them from a gas station. His hair was gelled. He was smiling the smile he used when he wanted something. "Nora," he said, "I've been driving for 36 hours. Can I come in?" Behind her, she heard Cole's boots on the hardwood. He'd been in the kitchen making coffee, and now he was standing in the doorway, looking from Jake to Nora, and his face had gone back to the way it was on day one, closed, careful, the face of a man who'd learned not to expect anything. "Who's this?" Cole said. "Jake, Nora stopped. "My ex-fiancé," Jake corrected. "We were engaged. I'm here to fix things." He looked past Nora, at Cole, and his smile got tighter. "I didn't realize you had company." "I don't," Nora said. "He lives here." "I'm working. Jake said it like it was a joke. "Right, look, Nora, can we talk?" "Privately." She looked at Cole. He was staring at the floor, his jaw tight, his hand curled into a fist at his side. She thought about last night, the porch, the wine, his mouth on hers, and thought, this is exactly why I don't do this. Exactly why I write other people's lives instead of living my own. "Give me a minute," she said to Cole. She stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. Jake talked for 20 minutes. He was sorry. He'd changed. He'd been seeing a therapist. He missed her. He'd bought a ring, a new one, better than the old one. He could have her old job back, or a better one. They could get married in the spring. He had it all planned, the way he always did, neat and organized and entirely about what he wanted. Nora listened. And when he finished, she said, "Jake, I'm not coming back." He stared at her. "You're choosing this? A ranch in the middle of nowhere? A guy who doesn't talk?" "I'm choosing me," she said. "For the first time, I'm choosing me." He left. The flowers stayed on the porch step, wilting in the Colorado sun. Nora went back inside. Cole was gone. His truck was missing from the driveway. The kitchen was empty. The coffee pot was still warm. She found a note on the counter, in his messy handwriting, "Gone into town." "Be back later." She stared at the note. Then her phone rang. "Vivian. Nora, darling. How's the book?" Vivian's voice was bright, efficient. The voice of a woman who'd never been alone in a kitchen at 7 a.m. with a note and a decision she wasn't sure she'd made right. "Listen, the sales team is nervous. They want more. The baseball stuff is fine, but it's been done. We need the human interest. The drinking. The divorce. The night you told me about, the one after the injury? That's gold, put it in. And if there's anything else, anything at all, you put it in. This book needs to sell, Nora. You need it to sell. Your last 3 advances didn't earn out. This one has to." Nora sat down at the kitchen table. The note was in front of her. The flowers were outside, dying in the sun. Her laptop was open on the table, the manuscript half written, safe and boring, and exactly what Cole had signed up for. She thought about Vivian's words. You need it to sell. She thought about her bank account, about the rent on her Brooklyn apartment, about the 3 books that hadn't earned out. She thought about Cole, last night, telling her about his dad, his voice breaking, his hand in hers. She opened a new folder on her laptop. Labeled it, Confidential, Bennett. She didn't put anything in it. Not yet, but she created it, and that she knew was the first step. Cole came back from town at 4 that afternoon, and he didn't say where he'd been. He set a paper bag on the counter. Coffee, a loaf of sourdough, a jar of honey from Mabel's bees, and went outside to check the horses. Nora watched him through the kitchen window, the way she'd watched him on day 1, from a distance, taking notes. Except now the distance felt different. Now it felt like something she'd broken. She'd spent the morning on the phone with Vivian, who'd called twice more, each time more urgent. The drinking, Nora. The divorce. The night after the injury. People don't buy memoirs for the baseball. They buy them for the pain. Nora had told herself she was just being thorough. Just doing her job. That was why she'd taken the small digital recorder from her bag. The one she used for interviews. The one she hadn't used with Cole because he'd said he wouldn't talk. She clipped it to the inside of her jacket pocket and turned it on before she went outside that evening. They sat on the back porch, the way they had every night for 2 weeks. Cole opened a beer. Nora poured wine. The mountains turned pink and then purple and then black. And Cole talked. Really talked. The way he only did when the fire was low and the stars were out and there was nothing else to do. He told her about the year after the injury. The drinking. The divorce. His wife, Sarah, who'd left because he'd become someone she didn't recognize. Angry and drunk and cruel in a way he'd never been before. He told her about the night he'd sat in his truck in the parking lot of a bar, engine running, and thought about not going home. He told her about the ranch, how he'd bought it with the last of his signing bonus, how it was the only thing that had kept him from disappearing entirely. Nora listened. And the recorder in her pocket listened too. When he finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I've never told anyone that. Not Sarah, not my agent, not even Mabel, and Mabel knows everything." Nora's throat went tight. "Why me?" "Because you're a writer," he said, and he smiled, sad and tired. "Because you know what to do with the hard parts. You make them mean something." She should have told him then. She should have pulled the recorder out of her pocket and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I was scared and I did a stupid thing." But she didn't. She sat there and let him believe she was different, and the recorder kept spinning, and she told herself it was just research. He found it the next morning. She'd left her jacket on the kitchen chair, and the recorder had slipped out of the pocket onto the seat. Cole picked it up when he came in for coffee. He looked at it, turned it over, pressed play. Nora heard his voice from the kitchen, low, steady, telling the story he told her last night, the one about the truck and the bar and not going home. And then she heard the recorder click off, and the kitchen went very quiet. She walked in. Cole was standing by the table, the recorder in his hand, his face the color of stone. "You recorded me," he said. "Cole, you recorded me last night. When I told you..." He stopped, swallowed. "When I told you I'd never told anyone. It was just for the book. I wasn't going to..." "The book." He said it like it was a dirty word. "Right, the book. The one you promised you'd keep safe. The one you said was just baseball, just the safe version. I was going to..." "You were going to what? Use the part about the truck? The drinking? The divorce?" Vivian called, didn't she? "She told you to dig for the good stuff." He set the recorder down on the table. It made a small final sound. "I thought you were different. I thought you were the one person who wasn't going to use me for a story. Cole, I didn't use anything. I haven't written a word of... yet." He looked at her, and his eyes were cold, the way they'd been on day one, before the fence and the beer and the fire and the kiss. "You know what the worst part is? I believed you. I believed you when you said you wouldn't touch my manuscript. I believed you when you said you were choosing yourself. Turns out you're just like the rest of them. You write everyone else's life so you don't have to live your own." The words landed like a punch. Because they were true. Because Jake had said the same thing. Because Nora had spent her whole career hiding behind other people's stories, and now she'd hidden behind Cole's, and he'd seen her. "I'm leaving," she said. Her voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. "I'll finish the book from town. You'll get the baseball version, the safe one. No drinking, no divorce, none of it." She packed her bag in 10 minutes. She didn't take the recorder. She left it on the kitchen table where he'd set it down. She loaded her car, got in, and drove down the 3-mile driveway without looking back. The motel in town was called the Pine Ridge, and it smelled like cigarettes and carpet cleaner. Nora checked in, carried her bag to room 12, and sat on the edge of the bed. She pulled out her laptop, opened the manuscript, stared at the half-finished chapters, the baseball, the stats, the safe, boring, approved version. Then she opened the folder labeled Confidential, Bennett. There was nothing in it. She'd never put anything there. She'd created it. And then she'd been too ashamed, or too scared, or too much in love with the man she was supposed to be writing about to fill it. She deleted the folder. Then she opened a new document. Typed a title, The Last Inning, by Nora Chen, based on the true story of Cole Bennett, with his permission. She didn't have his permission. Not anymore, but she started writing anyway. The real story. The drinking, the divorce, the truck in the parking lot, the man who'd been alone for 6 years and had let her in, and she'd broken it. She wrote until the sun came up. And when she finished the first chapter, she sat back and looked at it and thought, this is the book he deserves, even if he never speaks to me again. She wrote for 3 weeks. Nora stayed in the Pine Ridge Motel, room 12, and wrote every day from 6 in the morning until the light failed through the smudged window. She wrote the baseball, the minor league bus rides, the first major league pitch, the all-star game, the injury. She wrote the drinking and the divorce and the truck in the parking lot, but she wrote them without judgment, without spectacle, the way you'd write about a friend who'd been in pain. She wrote about the ranch and the horses and the way Cole talked to Daisy like she could understand every word. And she wrote about the night on the porch, the fire, the kiss. Not as a scene in a memoir, but as a note at the end, in the acknowledgments. For Cole, you said I knew what to do with the hard parts. I hope I got yours right. She didn't send it to Vivian. Not yet. She printed 2 copies, one for herself, one for him, and drove the 3 miles up the dirt road at dusk, when the mountains were turning gold and the pines were throwing long shadows across the driveway. Cole's truck was there. The lights were on in the house. Nora sat in her car for 10 minutes, her hands on the steering wheel, the manuscript on the passenger seat. Then she got out, walked to the porch, and set the book by the door. She tucked a note under the cover. I didn't send it to anyone. It's yours. Read it or burn it. Either way, I'm sorry. And she got back in her car and drove away. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She'd taken enough from him already. Vivian called 3 days later, screaming, "Where is it? Where's the manuscript? The deadline was yesterday and I have nothing." "I'm not sending it," Nora said. She was packing her car, getting ready to drive back to Brooklyn. The motel room was almost empty. Not unless he says yes. "Nora, this is your career. This book is his life, and I don't get to tell it without him." She zipped her suitcase. "I'm going home, Viv. I'll find another way to pay the rent." She hung up. She got in her car. She drove east, out of the mountains, onto the highway, toward the city she'd run from, and the life she'd been avoiding. 2 months later, the book came out. Not because Nora had sent it, because Cole had. He'd called her on a Tuesday in November, his voice rough and quiet, and said, "I read it, twice. You got the part about my dad wrong." He didn't just come to 1 game. He came to 2. "But the rest," he paused, "the rest is true. Publish it, but if you're going to put my name on it, you'd better be ready to do the book tour with me." She'd done the tour. They'd gone to 12 cities, sat on a dozen stages, answered 100 questions about baseball and betrayal and recovery. And every night, after the event, they'd walk back to the hotel together, and he'd carry her bag, and she'd lean into his shoulder, and neither of them would say anything because they didn't need to. The launch party was in Brooklyn, at a bookstore in Park Slope that Nora had been going to since college. The room was full. Friends, readers, Vivian in a corner drinking champagne, Mabel, who'd flown in from Colorado wearing a hat with a feather. Nora stood at the front holding the book and looked out at the crowd, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was hiding behind someone else's words. "Before I read," she said, "I want to thank the man who let me tell his story, even after I gave him every reason not to." She looked at the back of the room, where Cole was standing in a flannel shirt and work boots, holding a beer, watching her like she was the only person in the room. "Cole Bennett, this book is as much yours as it is mine." He didn't wave. He just nodded. And later, when the party was over, and the bookstore was empty, and the staff was stacking chairs, he came over to where she was sitting on the edge of the stage, swinging her legs, and he said, "You looked good up there. I was terrified." "I know." He sat down next to her. Their shoulders touched. "You didn't have to do the tour, you know. I could have done it alone. You couldn't have. You hate talking to people." He laughed. It was still a rare sound, but it was getting less rare. True. They sat in silence for a while, the bookstore quiet around them, the lights dim, the smell of old paper and new books and champagne. And then Cole said, "I've been writing. My own stuff. Not for a book. Just for me. Nora looked at him. Yeah? Yeah, Mabel says it's good. I think she's biased. He paused. You were right, you know, about the hard parts. You don't fix them. You just write them down. And then they're not as heavy. She thought about the box of her mother's letters, sitting on her desk at home, unopened for 2 years. She thought about Jake, about the ranch, about the recorder on the kitchen table and the words that had broken them apart, and then, slowly, put them back together. I'm going to write something of my own, she said. Not for anyone else. For me. Cole laced his fingers through hers. I'd read it, yeah? Yeah. He looked at her, and his eyes were warm, and there was no distance left between them, no closed doors, no recorders, no safe versions. But only if you dedicate it to me, she smiled. Deal. They sat there a while longer, in the empty bookstore, holding hands, while the city hummed outside and the books waited on the shelves, and Nora thought, for the first time in her life, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm writing my own story, and this time, I'm not going to stop.